CDL Major 4 is this week, so let's talk about who I think can actually win the event and where I would place each team in the tier list going into DreamHack. Online qualifiers are officially done, which is just awesome to say. It's sad that the season feels like it's coming to an end, but not having watched any more online, I'm not going to complain about, but let's go through this. This was the list last week as we headed into the last week of online qualifiers, but now we're going to update it. And we'll start at the top because I feel like the top's a little bit easier. FaZe, LAT are obviously staying in winner's potential tier. They've won events. They're going to be staying there. Toronto Ultra is an interesting one because obviously Toronto has the talent to win an event, right? We know it. Insight CleanX have won events every single year. But when you look at the way they've played recently, they beat Ravens, C9, and Rocker, who are all like mid-pack or worse teams. And then they lost to Surge and got 3-0'd by an Optic Texas team yesterday on Sunday, which is honestly not losses you can take if you're going to be a team competing for an event. Part of me actually wants to put Ultra down in the borderline tier, not only because of their recent performances not looking too good and honestly just not looking strong all around, but also they haven't even made a grand final yet, right? So like having them in the winner potential tier feels like it might be a little bit high, although Ultra's a team that like I always have faith in. I think Jodeci's is great. I think CleanX is great. I think Beans and Insight, especially Beans, does his job really well. Insight rotates really well on the map, even though he might not get kills. They're a team that, like, of course, they have the potential to win, but I almost don't know if it's on the same level or on the same caliber as the team like FaZe or LAT. I really think it's 50-50 for Toronto, but I'll be generous. We'll keep them in the winner's potential tier. Then we move down to the Vancouver Surge. The Surge started off this split losing to FaZe and losing to Optic, another team that got 3-0'd by Optic, another top team that got 3-0'd by Optic this stage is pretty crazy. But they 3-0'd Boston, they 3-1 Toronto, and they 3-1 the Minnesota Rocker. Going into last split, I said that this Surge team I thought was more of a borderline. I didn't really think they could contend. And now they did make another grand final. They did get 4-0'd again in that grand final. So I was kind of right and I was kind of wrong, right? It was definitely a bit of both. But going into this stage, especially if I'm going to give Toronto benefit of the doubt, I have to move Vancouver Surge up. They keep making grand finals. They can continue to beat Toronto Ultra more often than not. So I feel like I have to put them in this tier. The exact order doesn't really matter, but I'm just moving them over for the sake of it. And then we get to the last team that's currently in borderline, the Miami Heretics. I mean, Miami, 5-0 qualifier, right? So if they have the 5-0 undefeated curse, they're pretty much screwed. But putting curses to the side, whether you believe in that sort of thing or not, 3-2 over LAT. They beat LAG, they beat Falcons, they beat C9, and they beat Ravens. So, I mean, honestly, they really only beat like two good teams. I feel like this split, right? LAT and C9. Ravens are kind of mid to bad at this point. Falcons and LAG, we know, are just the two worst teams in the game. But this is a team, right, in Miami Heretics who beat FaZe on LAN, who beat Ultra on LAN, even though they ended up losing to them, who is one of, if not maybe the best SND team in the game ever since they picked up Super. Again, it might be generous, it might be hot takes, but it's the last event of the year. Let's have some fun with it. I'm putting the Miami Heretics in winning potential tier. I think potentially these five teams could all win the event on their day. And I think most importantly, it comes down to matchups, right? FaZe feel like they match up well versus Thieves. Surge feel like they match up well versus FaZe. LAT feels like they match up well versus Surge and Heretics. Surge matches up well with Toronto Ultra. Miami might match up well with a team like Atlanta FaZe. Like there's a lot of matchups here that I think would determine almost who would make a run in the bracket based on who they end up playing and like where they'd fall in the bracket. But now let's flip it on over to the bottom side. We got the booty cheeks tier. We got Falcons and we got LAG. There's really not a whole lot to say. I mean, LAG did beat Optic, but I still don't think they're that good. I'm keeping both of these teams in the booty cheeks tier, honestly. We don't even have to go into it that much. And then moving up to the mid tier, I do think realistically, you could drop Boston and even Ravens down into the booty cheeks tier, but I'm going to give them both benefit of the doubt, especially because Boston specifically has gotten back-to-back top sixes, even though both of these teams look pretty poor form right now heading into the major. But what I will say is I'm going to, even though the exact order doesn't really matter all that much, I'm going to move Minnesota Rocker up above them because I do think they're better, but I don't really think Rocker is a dark horse team. I don't really think they're a borderline team. I'd be shocked if they got beyond like a top six, depending on who they play in the bracket, the way it falls out. But I think these teams are all just pretty mid, or like a top 6 is probably their ceiling, but they could also go out top 12. And real quick, I want to shout out the sponsor of today's video, 1v1me. You can watch and stake esports all day on this application. They've given out over $100 million in prize money to players on their app. And if you want to support me, the channel, and the content, make sure to click the link down below. Use code ATC for a $10 stake at sign up. And I appreciate you all, and let's get back to the video. Then we go into our last 2 teams that are currently in the dark horse tier. We're going to start off with Cloud9. C9 feels like a tough team to rank, right? Because obviously new roster, they've only played 5 matches. Their only wins come against Vegas, one of the worst teams in the game, and Atlanta FaZe, one of the best teams in the game. And then they lost 3-1 to Ultra, they lost 3-1 to Heretics, and they lost 3-0 to Thieves, which, I mean, all 3 of those teams are top class teams, right? Upper caliber. I mean, 4 of the teams they played, I have in the winning potential tier, which is a pretty tough schedule for a C9 team, which makes me feel like they're probably in the mid to dark horse range, but they did beat Atlanta FaZe, which I know it was online, but that is still a, you know, pretty solid victory, and they're going to be getting a rematch versus FaZe in winners round 1 at the major. Again, I'm going to give a little bit of benefit of the doubt here to C9 because we have not seen this version of their roster play on LAN yet. They do have a pretty tough round 1 matchup, like I said, versus FaZe on LAN is always tough, but I'm going to be keeping them in the dark horse tier, although you could probably bump them down to like top of mid if you really wanted to. And then last but not least, of course, we have Optic Texas. You already know I had to save Optic for last. You need that viewer retention if you want your YouTube videos to get views. So I hope you understand that. But Optic had a crazy split. I mean, look at it. 3-0, 3-2, 3-0, 3-2, 3-0. The only losses came in game 5s. The wins all came in 3-0s. And 2 of those 3-0s were against 2 of the best teams in the game, right? Vancouver Surge, and that was before they even had Mercules. And then Toronto Ultra yesterday on Sunday. So this Optic team is all over the board. They are beating some of the best, and they are losing to some of the worst, like LAG, obviously, also this past weekend. And looking at their stats, this is their map count down here at the bottom with Mercules on the team. Even in Hardpoint, even in SND, 4-0 in control. And I believe they've only dropped 2 rounds in that control, which is, or in all 4 of their controls, which is pretty insane, right? One of the best control teams this stage with Mercules on the roster. But where do I put them on the tier list? And I'm going to keep them in the dark horse tier. I'm going to move them over to C9 because I think they're probably better than them. But to me, this Optic team is the epitome of a dark horse. They can beat the best on their day, and they can lose to the worst on a bad day, which is like that inconsistency to me is not good enough to put you at borderline, but it's obviously not bad enough to drop you any lower on this list. I think Optic is the dark horse team going into this event. And if you're an Optic fan and that upsets you, it shouldn't, because Optic coming in as a dark horse based on how this season went is honestly a big improvement, a big upgrade to how their season has gone. And I would bet they're going to get better than they top 8 at this event for sure. I honestly think at worst, they probably go out top 6, if not could make a Sunday with this roster. But again, the inconsistencies are really hard to bet on. And it's going to come down to how they can put it all together on LAN. And especially if they can, you know, sort out a couple of their SND woes. And because if they did, they could have went 5-0 this split, right? If they were able to clutch up in game 5s. But this is the tier list heading into DreamHack Major 4. I'm going to be there at the event, so if you're going to be there, make sure to come say what's up, which of course means there's no watch party, so sorry to all my watch party folks. Appreciate you guys, but we'll be back to watch party for Champs and EWC, but stay tuned. A lot more content to come. Podcast around the CDL live tonight with bracket predictions, and we're bringing viewers on the show to give us your predictions. So definitely check that out. Turn noties on. But as always, I appreciate the support, and I'll see you all in the next video.